ASISTS resource bank or somewhere in addition. So we're just going to go over some end of year tips, things that like I would do if I was either troubleshooting for you, or maybe if I was a program manager and I was trying to improve my data. Some of the, sorry, I have to say, okay, we're recording. Okay. Some of the things that I would probably do just to improve my numbers in any way that I can. So sort of, you know, some of these things may not be one size fits all. So take this with a grain of salt. And certainly if you have questions afterwards, don't hesitate to ask. If we have time at the end, we'll answer questions. You can put those questions in the chat. Nell will be helping me monitor the chat. And otherwise, you can always put in a support ticket if you have further questions. So I rounded up what I would consider my top 5 end of year resources, and we're going to go over each of these and sort of how to use them, what they look like, and maybe some ways to use them that those of you who are newer users might not have thought of. Those of you who are more experienced users might already be doing some of these things. And I encourage you to share with your colleagues in the chat if you have a clever thing that you do to help your end of year numbers as well. So we're going to look at the new student post-test rate document, partially because I think not everybody has noticed that it exists. Not everybody reads my resource notes or release notes. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to talk about the WIOA and AL survey tools, the outcome survey tools, and social security number versus no social security number. We're going to talk about the current fiscal year exeter outcome survey tool, not because it helps this year's reports, but because it helps future. It helps future you. So it's the thing your present day you can do to help future you. We're going to talk about the student assessment and attendance data check and the student exit tool by student. So some of these are on our funding reports data check menus, and some of them are in our management reports, and they are things that we could use, again, not specifically for our current fiscal year numbers, but perhaps to help future years. So the 90% post-test rate target for eligible students has been in existence now for 2 or 3 years now, but you were sort of left on your own to figure out whether or not you had achieved that, and that's obviously not an ideal situation. So we did design a new data check that is available for both NRS and NYRS. It uses a standard 40-hour threshold for everyone, regardless of the fact whether you might have one-on-one tutoring situations where technically the student can be post-tested after 30 hours, and you might have more intensive situations where you're really supposed to be waiting until 60 hours. State Ed told us to use the baseline of 40 as the standard, which will probably help anyway. And it includes only the NRS and NYRS valid hours. So what that means is if you have a career and technical education program or other training classes that are going on, technically those are not hours that count on your NRS or NYRS reports, and so those are not included in this particular report. So if you haven't already taken a look, what you will see when you look at your 90% post-test rate, and actually it's called student contact hours, student post-test rate, parentheses 40+ hours. It will show you for each instructional level, it will show you which period of participation we're talking about, whether or not the student has a pre and post test for that particular period of participation, how many contact hours the student has accumulated, again, in their NRS eligible classes, and whether or not the student has a post test. And this is just a simple yes or no. And it calculates for you the total for that particular level it tells you the total for that instruction type, ABE, ESL, or math, as a whole, and then your percentage as of yesterday's data for overall post-testing rate. This post-test report is available on your funding reports menu. Let me see if I can do a new share real quick. No, sorry, let's go back. Still talking about this. And oh my goodness. Okay. There. Just share ASISTS real quick with you so you can see where to find it. And let me do a new share. There we go. This is on our funding reports menu, and in both the NRS WIOA data checks or the NYRS data checks, this item is going to be the last one all the way down at the bottom, this student post-test rates 40+ hours. So that's where you're going to find that. And that is specifically to help you figure out whether or not you're hitting that target. It's not listed specifically on the program evaluation report. That might change for next year. We haven't talked to state ed about whether or not they want to make changes to the program evaluation report and put some of these statistics there, but you do at least have a data check for you to be monitoring that item. Okay, so let's go back. Okay. The WIOA and AL outcome survey tools, again, also available on your NRS or NYRS data checks menus. It is also available as the table 5 data check because they are essentially the same thing, and you can filter that depending upon which one you're looking for. But what I think people have not realized so much is that your outcome rate and your survey rate, they're more in your hands than you might realize, just because you have control over whether or not you keep a student's social security number, right? We're all being asked not just to meet our 90% survey rate, but also to meet our percentage target of positive outcomes. And if you have students who are in the social security number group, that's sort of out of your hands. You're not held accountable for surveying those students because you don't have control over whether or not those students, whether we get a return on that data check or that data match, sorry. But if you are having trouble meeting your positive outcome rate, then you can, in addition to surveying the students in the no social security number section who are listed as students without social security number, you can also technically survey the students who have a social security number. What that means, though, is that you need to manually take that social security number out if and when you get a survey on that student. Obviously, we would prefer it to be a positive survey, but if you are having trouble making your positive outcome number or your survey rate, then we want to definitely be doing some of that extra surveying, right? Once you take the social security number out for that student, then they will move, they'll shift up into the group that are the students without the social security number. Only one person at each agency is authorized to see the social security number. If you don't know who that is, if you are the program manager especially, and you don't know who that is, then that is definitely a support ticket that should be put in to find out who that person is. And if we determine that either there is no one currently with the social security number access, or maybe that person has since moved on, then it's time to change that and make it somebody who's currently with you, and you can decide who the most appropriate person will be, and we will make that change. What that requires, and Nell, I would love it if you put this in writing in the chat for everyone. What that requires is that you email support, you email and you copy that email to your RAIN director and your state ed representative. They don't really need to approve it. Some of the reps, they'll write back that it's approved, and that's fine. They don't necessarily need to approve it. We just need that paper trail to exist. And as soon as that paper trail exists, you as the program manager have control over who that access should be. And I will make that change in your user accounts to make sure that the right person can see the social security numbers. The other thing I wanted to show you about social security numbers. Whoops, lovely. Okay. When we look at a student with a social security number, of course I didn't queue somebody up, but if we had a student with a social security number, right, and we want to take that out, the process for that is probably a little more Stone Age than you might think. You're going to come in here, and if it's not already highlighted when you navigate into the field, you're going to double click it or triple click it, whatever it takes in your browser to highlight that whole social security number, and you're going to backspace. Literally just use your backspace key or your delete key, and you're going to save that change, and that's going to take that social security number out. So for the field as a whole, for the pop-up as a whole, there's no like delete button, which we see in some cases, like on test scores or status entries, things like that. That's not here for the social security number. You're literally just going to clear out the field and then save that change, and that's going to move that student into the other group. Okay. We also have a question in the chat that says, if we have somebody without a social security number who is unresponsive or declined to answer the phone survey, how do we enter that information? So my answer is actually different depending upon whether they are unresponsive or whether they declined to answer. And I'm saying that because if you are entering information about someone who is unresponsive, like you never speak with them, then you can, if you choose, enter the outcome of did not survey. And that did not survey basically sends a message to the next person who might look at this record not to bother. Like, we tried, we're not going to get in touch with them. They didn't respond to our phone call, our email, our postcard, everything. We tried everything. Don't even worry, don't bother anymore. And you're going to put in a do not survey for whatever quarter that outcome should have happened in, which we're going to talk a little bit about in a couple of minutes. So whatever quarter after exit, that outcome should have happened. And whatever day you decide to call it quits and say, I'm not spending any more time on this, that's for an unresponsive person. If you have somebody who's unwilling to answer, I feel like that is kind of saying not employed, right? To me, I get the impression that the reason they don't want to answer maybe is because they feel like they don't want to have to say that they're unemployed. I would call that a survey. If you actually speak to the person and you get sort of an answer, I would put that in as a negative outcome. And then at least you're getting credit for having spoken to that student, and they can count towards your 90% survey rate, even though you're not going to be able to claim credit for an outcome. It's not an ideal situation, but I feel like you can justify being able to say, like, you actually did speak with that person, even though you couldn't technically get an answer from them. Okay, Sabina, go ahead and ask a question.
I would like to ask you, for example, student was unemployed, and in the second quarter also was unemployed. But when I check that student on the fourth quarter, I find out that student found a job. I have
Mhm.
to put that on the fourth quarter, but should I follow up for the next another two quarters to put it something else, or it's enough for the fourth quarter?
No, so I'm going to come back to this question in
Okay.
just a couple of minutes because I want to talk about time frames. Okay. My short answer though is no. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slideshow. Where's my slideshow? Really helpful. Where's my slideshow? Oh, here we go. Sorry. Okay. So along the same lines as what we were just talking about with the students who we are following up with on table 5, please also be aware that there is an outcome survey tool that is meant to help you, again, meant to help you help future you by surveying students more quickly for students who have exited this fiscal year. They're not going to be on table 5. They're not going to be on your WIO outcome survey tool. They're not going to be on your AL outcome survey tool. They're going to be on next year's WIO or AL outcome survey tool, and you'll be held accountable for their employment next year. But students who exited in quarters 1 or 2 of this fiscal year, so that's July through December, we can follow up with those students now on their second quarter after exit employment. And this is why I want to talk about time frame and second and fourth quarter. Whenever we're talking about second and fourth quarter, we're always talking about second quarter after the student's exit date or fourth quarter after the student's exit date. So it's not, I've been seeing a lot of, I've been getting some support questions where people have put an outcome in just sort of across the board. They've done it in the second quarter of fiscal 2024 or in the fourth quarter of fiscal 2024 because they're interpreting second and fourth quarter as of the fiscal year. And that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the second quarter after the student left us or was exited, and the fourth quarter after the student was exited. And so that's going to be different for every single student. I mean, there's only 4 of them. It's not going to be that different, but it's going to be completely individual to each student based on when they exited the program. So if I'm looking at the current FY exiters for surveying, there is an outcome survey tool in our management report section that will show you students who left this fiscal year. And we can be surveying those students about their second quarter after exit employment right now. And the reason I wanted to kind of circle back to Sabina's question is there's a calendar and a chart available in the ASISTS resource bank. I included a QR code that will take you directly to it. And again, you're going to get copies of this. But if I go to my, nope, whoops. If I go to, oh, there we go. All right. You should be seeing my 2024 and 25 employment follow-up outcome data entry chart. And the color-coded rows are the ones that are going to be on this fiscal year's report. So you see the fiscal year that the student exited. You see, so we show you the exit quarter, we show you the outcome quarter, and for second quarter, and the outcome quarter for fourth. Once this time frame is done, even if they were unemployed the first time you spoke with them, and now they are employed, once these time frames leave, the questions that state ed and the federal education department are interested in, they are answered, right? It's great if the student keeps the job that they ended up with when you spoke with them 4 quarters after they left. That's fantastic. We're very happy for them. But they're no longer a part of your report for this question. Little asterisk there, unless they returned after they exited and now they might be on a new report going forward in the future. But for the purposes of your WIOA or your AIL outcome survey tool, once 4 quarters pass after the student leaves, we're done asking questions for that student. So utilizing this particular document, checking what quarter the student left, and then asking the questions about the proper time frame, that's essentially the end of the questions for that student. So the color-coded ones are for the students who are on this year's reports. They are on your program evaluation report. They're on your Table 5 data check, et cetera, et cetera. And the gray ones you can see are for the students who left in 2024 in the current fiscal year. And those students, we can already start surveying for fiscal 2025 reports going forward for Q2 at least. Okay. I see Penny asked the question about the survey percentages. I think the overall survey percentage needs to be at 90%. I don't think they both need to be at 90, but if you had 95 on one and 85 on the other, you should well, let me take that back. If of the total number of surveys you have to do, you do 90% of them, the overall percentage should be 90%. That's my understanding. Okay. So again, I just want to make it really clear that when we're talking about second quarter employment and fourth quarter employment, it's not a specific second quarter or a specific fourth quarter. It's going to be based on the student's exit date. And that tool that's available in the ASISTS Resource Bank is meant to help you make sure you're asking the right questions, and also meant to help you in entering the information in ASISTS. So if you're asking the student about FY23 Q4, it goes in as an outcome of FY23 Q4. If you're asking them about FY24 Q1, you're entering that into ASISTS in that way as well. The new share button just keeps not wanting to do that, right? So if I was supposed to ask this student about Q3 of 2024, because they left in Q1 of 2024, then the outcome is Q3 2024. I could talk to them today. It's already Q4 of 2024. I could talk to them in 2 months. That'll be fiscal 2025. But if the outcome should have happened based on that calendar we just looked at, based on that chart we just looked at, if the outcome should have happened in Q3 2024, that's the outcome I enter. If you are having difficulty getting your students to count for your outcomes, if you're putting outcomes in and you don't seem to be getting credit for those positive outcomes you're putting in, that's definitely a support question. You are going to put in a support ticket, and you're going to say in that support ticket, I am having trouble getting credit for the outcome that I put in for this one student, these 4 students, however many examples you can give us, that's great. We will look at that and tell you what change needs to be made or what question should have been answered in order to be able to claim positive credit for that. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question. If not, definitely come back to me and we can revisit. Okay, let's talk about the student assessment and attendance data check. This again is available on your WIOA or WIOA NRS or your NYRS data checks. And this is going to include all of the students who are already on your report. So they've met that threshold of having a pretest, having 12 or more contact hours, and all their key demographics. So you can see whether or not those students have shown gain, et cetera. But more importantly, you can see when was the last time the student attended, which can be useful. And if they've exited, you can see if they have a post-test and gain, or if they have a post-test and no gain. What I love about this report is you can see how close they are to that gain. So even before we take a look at that report, I want to point out that in the ASISTS resource bank, in the assessments resources, there is a document that is simply NRS and NYRS level information. And it gives you, the first page is the NRS level information for either the TABE or the Best Plus. And the second page is the NYRS, takes up a little more room because we've got some extra levels there. But what we have documented is the precise scale score that is going to put a student into each level. You probably already have this documentation somewhere. You just might not have it at your fingertips. If you've never thought about this before, I'm asking you to think about it now. When you're looking at your student assessment attendance, we specifically give you the scale scores so that you can see how close is a student to moving into that next level. So I have, and here's a QR code to that particular document. Again, it's in the ASISTS resource bank in the assessments resources folder, and it's called the NRS and NYRS levels. Okay. I'll leave that up for just a second. But again, you're going to get a copy of this. But that document is going to show you all those levels, NRS or NYRS. Okay, we'll move on. And so what I've done in my example is something that you as a program manager or a data manager could definitely take a look at and see of your students. And this happens to be students who pre-tested into level 2, right? Of your students, you can immediately see who hasn't yet shown gain, right? And I missed one to, oh no, I didn't. Okay, so you can see exactly who hasn't shown gain yet. You can see who's exited. So those students, maybe you don't want to call them back because you don't, either you're going to have difficulty getting credit for having given that post test, or you might start them on a new period of participation. That's up to you, not my call, that's your call. But for the students who are still with you, who have not yet exited, you can see who either has a post test and hasn't shown gain and is still around, or who hasn't taken a post test and is still around, right? We also give you the number of contact hours. So for some students like this one, this student's pretty new. They only just tested in April. They only have 20 hours. It's not really appropriate to post test them. So a lot of information right there on one page already. So I can target in on the students who haven't post tested, who haven't shown gain, even though they did post test, and also maybe target those students who I haven't seen in a little while. Like I haven't seen this student since January, February, March, April. It's actually kind of too late unless I've got a post test, another post test sitting in a drawer somewhere. But the students who I haven't seen since March, did I not put in April attendance, or have I really not seen them since March? If that's the case, now's my opportunity to pull them back in. If I pull them back in and they have hours for that post test, then I stave off their exit for a little while, and I potentially get not just the post test statistic, but a gain statistic. Given that we all don't have 1 million hours in the day, maybe I want to zero in even a little bit more, right? So if I look at the next slide, I am now zeroing in on the students who have the most potential for gain out of the students who I highlighted on the previous page. So if I was going to target students for gain, I would look at the students who are sort of in the upper half already of level 2. So if I go back to my document, right, level 2 goes up to scale score of 495, right? 495. If I look at my examples, keep putting your faces in front of my slideshow button. There we go. Okay. If I look at my examples, I have a student here who's at 477. Still kind of far to go. I have this student, he's at 487. She's at 487. I've got this student who pre-tested at 485. This student pre-tested at 495. They're like this close, right, to getting up to the next level versus the student who maybe is still at like 450, 456, right? These students have more of a potential for gain. If I have the TABE report, the analysis report, then I even have more potential, right? That's like not ASISTS work, right? That's separate, but you could even target closer those students who are this close to gain by maybe having their teachers work on just the things that they needed some extra help in, right? That's a separate thing. Okay. So it's just another way of trying to use your time efficiently, right? Trying to get just those good statistics. Ultimately, we would love to see every student post-tested, every student have the potential for gain, right? When they meet that threshold, but we all know that that's not always possible. So maybe we want to target in our efforts a little bit more clearly. Okay. Okay. When we talk about the student exit tool by student, I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this, but the student exit tool by student is a management report. Again, I will share my ASISTS screen. And when we look at the student exit tool by student, we're going to management reports and our exiting and outcome reports. And it is the student exit tool by student. This document is going to change every month. It's going to show you the students who are anticipated to exit when we perform the exits at the end of the current month. It tells you what their anticipated exit month is. So for this month, May, we will be exiting students who we have not seen since January. Now, this is my practice data. It's garbage. Don't even look at it for detail or specifics. What I want you to look at is the exit month, because when you look at yours, you should be seeing students who are currently anticipated to exit as of January, because they did not attend February, March, or April. And you have the month of May, the 4th month after we last saw them, to make sure that you're not missing anything. Every single month when we do our exiting, I inevitably get some support tickets put in the following week where agencies have lost credit for post tests because when the exits are performed, they have an exit date that now falls before their post test was administered. So if you're looking at your student exit tool by student, right, and you're looking at who is on that student exit tool by student, for most agencies, even those of you who are a little bit larger, maybe not your DOEs, right? Or maybe some of you, if you're like one of the Long Island BOCES, you have thousand students, maybe it's not worth it for you, but I would argue that it might be still. But it is probably worth it for you to go through this once a month, check the students who are on there, and just see if you have any testing that was done after they stopped attending actual classes. Because you know the attendance is in there for the actual classes, but are there contact hours in there for the tests that were administered after that, right? If that's the case, if there's a test that is after when we stop seeing that student in class, you will eventually lose credit for that test. And we don't want that to happen. So if any of these students took a test in February or March or April, I can still put in that one contact hour, those 3 contact hours, whatever it took to post-test that student. I can still put them in right now before the end of May. And it will prevent that student from exiting and losing credit for that post-test. But if I wait, that test is going to end up invalid. So I would suggest, depending upon how big this is, depending upon, like I said, I think it would probably be worth it for most agencies. You can, your mileage may vary. You can decide for yourselves. But if you wanted to utilize a report to help you with this, the other item you could look at is the contact hours menu for the contact hours testing summary report. And that document is going to show you, again, this is my garbage data, take it with a grain of salt, but it will show you the months in which students had tests. Those tests will be listed under each month when they tested. And you can check to see if there are hours in this first line here, this monthly hours line. Are there hours there? If there are hours in the month when the student tested, great. You don't have a problem. You don't have to worry about this particular situation. But if there aren't, like this student, they tested in December and there were no hours in December, I probably lost credit for this post-test in my dummy data that we don't report anyway. But I would have lost credit for this post-test because the student would have exited back on October 31st because there were no hours in the month where the student took the test. ASISTS doesn't care if they are specifically testing hours or specifically or their class hours. There just have to be hours, right? Could be testing hours, could be case management hours, could be class attendance. ASISTS doesn't care as long as there are some hours. And when you've got a student who stopped attending, the hours are probably post-testing hours, which might have been case management, might have just been a post-test, drop in, that kind of thing. But please, 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 please take credit and get those hours in so that you don't end up losing credit for those tests. Okay. And that document is listed here, the contact hours testing summary report to help you find it later. Okay. A little bit of bonus info outside of my testing, outside of my top 5 suggestions. This one, those of you who came to my NYACCE presentation, you've already heard this, but just please be aware there is a resource that we added to the resource bank from State Ed's HSC department about how program managers need to go into the GED management software and claim students. When you are managing those student records, you need to make sure that the student is not just interested in your program, but actually enrolled in your program in the GED software. That is the only way that your prep code is going to get associated with GED results when they go up to State Ed. And I will tell you, timing matters. This change needs to be made. This enrollment status needs to be made enrolled with your program before the student takes the test. These are electronic records, and for better or for worse, that means that these records are going up to State Ed on a more timely basis. They're going quicker. And if the student is not already associated as being or indicated as being enrolled in your program when they take the test, it is very likely that your prep code will not be associated with the student taking that test, which means that we cannot give you credit for that HSC. That process, that cycle needs to be in place. And we've definitely had support tickets recently that the students, they are enrolled now, right? But they were not enrolled when they took the tests where they passed. And so the question has come up: if the student enrolls with our GED prep code after taking a couple of the subtests, if they ultimately pass utilizing your code, if your GED prep code is the one associated with their passing score, then it should be credited to you. That's my understanding, because you enroll them, you help them with the last things they need to get help with, and then that ultimate HSC diploma result should be credited to your prep code. That's my understanding. So these few slides were taken from the overall HSC, NYACCE HSC presentation that they gave to us. So I pulled out the pieces that were most pertinent to us, but I do encourage you to take a look at that resource if you have any questions, or if you're having difficulty getting credit for your students. We will always try and help you get credit, and if HSC can verify for us that you should have gotten credit for someone because this procedure was followed, and just somehow that result didn't get given to us, then we are glad to credit you with that. But we do need, the easiest way for it to happen is that they get enrolled before that test is administered, and then that prep code gets tagged onto that result, and it goes up to HSE, and they award the diploma, and that information comes back to ASISTS with your prep code on it. Okay, that was a lot. What are we at? We've got 10 more minutes for questions. If people have questions, please let me know.
It looks like there is a GED question in the chat, but maybe you already responded to that.
I think I already responded
Okay.
to that. Please, Kathy, definitely
Yes.
let me know if that didn't answer your question. Trying to find the GED manager resource to it. So, okay, I will show you where that is. Let me just escape out of here. In our, no, hold on, stop, try to scan. It is actually, if you go to the ASISTS resource bank, resource bank, there we go. In the ASISTS resource bank, it is the folder labeled HSC, and it is the only, it's actually called, we just left it as what they called it, but it's the prep program age eligibility from NYACCE HSC. Okay. Sabina, question?
My question, if student took pre and post test, but the test English level in the same, NRS level, is the same level, and student complete the program, why student in ASISTS doesn't count like that student complete the program?
So, okay. So in ASISTS and for NRS and NYRS, the only completion that gets measured is if the student completes a level.
Oh, okay.
So you'll get credit for having post-tested the student, but if the student does not move into the next NRS or NYRS level, then you don't get credit for having completed what we're measuring.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
All right. Oh, okay. Let me just try and pull this up for Lori. Lori, I would say maybe download it. It might be giving you trouble. I'm actually surprised that it came up while I was on Zoom, because sometimes it does not like pulling up a PDF when I'm on Zoom. It certainly doesn't like it when I'm standing up in front of a whole training. Always gives me trouble. Gio, question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. This has been really helpful, Kate. But I just have a question, because when we pulled the WIOA NRS program evaluation report FY24, it looks like our post-test rate and the percentage with MSG is based on enrolled, not with that 40-hour plus threshold? Because when we pull the 40 plus, then of course our percentage goes up.
Right.
So I'm wondering how will, when we get our report card, how we're being evaluated, based on the 40 hours plus or based on the enrolled?
Both, for two different questions. So when you're looking at your NRS program evaluation report, and I will pull up the one for my dummy agency, even though it will be very bad. If we look at your program evaluation report, the 90% post-test rate, that is, so it's, like I said, it's not on the program evaluation report right now. It's not technically part of the program eval, as maybe state ed will have us put it on, but you've got your data check. For NRS or NYRS, your post-test rate percentage listed here and your percentage with MSG. This is not, first of all, this is not where you have a 90% post-test target. Okay, the 90%
Correct.
post-test target is for the students with over 40 hours.
Yes.
But for here, it's 70%. And for your percentage with MSG, it's like 52 or 54, right? I always forget. Please don't hold it against me. But that percentage is always going to be based on the students who are enrolled with 12 or more contact hours, because that's the OCTAE policy. That's the NRS policy, and trickles down to NYRS as well. So once a student hits that 12-hour threshold, they are part of your report. The separate post-testing guidelines, which are actually set more by the post-test manufacturers and agreed to by state ed, that's where we get that 30-hour, 40-hour, or 60-hour threshold of when you should be post-testing a student. So state ed knows that not every single student is going to reach that threshold, but of the students who reach that threshold and who are eligible, you should be getting a lot, because of your overall population, you need 70% to be post-tested and gain for 50 some odd percent of those students.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Nora. I can never remember year to year. It's terrible. I know. Just been too many years, right? Can you explain POP and TABE testing? We've got 6 minutes, so probably not in its entirety, but for periods of participation, this does kind of go back to our exiting, right? If a student exits and you choose to let them back into your program, then that student needs to accumulate another 12 hours to be eligible for their second period of participation, or to have an official second period of participation. And if they had a post-test in their first period of participation, it will count as a pre-test for the second period of participation. But if you did not have a post-test in your first period of participation, you're going to need to test that student again as a pre-test in their second period of participation. You then will have definitely one period of the first POP will not have a post-test. The second period of participation, you have the opportunity to pre and post-test that student before they leave. This is kind of why you may choose not to allow a student to come back for a second period of participation, depending upon what record you have for that student in their previous participation with you. But the other sort of way that you can help yourselves is to make sure that the students who are exiting are only the students who should exit. Meaning, if you have those hours that we were talking about where they came in for a post-test, or they continued to work with their case manager or whatever that might be, even after they stopped attending class on a regular basis, if they're continuing their contact with your agency for testing, for case management, for whatever other services you might be offering, that should be tracked in ASISTS so that that student doesn't exit until they really and truly should be exited, when they've received the services that they need and then they leave. I know it's not going to happen for everybody, but for those who we can sort of keep in until they're really ready to exit, that's going to prevent those multiple periods of participation, because when they leave, they're really going to leave instead of leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back, right? Sabina, you have another question? And I'm sorry, Kathleen, just let me know if that answered your question. We can certainly have another conversation.
I just want to confirm regarding the post-test rate. It's supposed to be 90% right now or 75?
So of your overall population of students, it should be 70%. That
Okay.
hasn't changed. That's been the same for a while. Of the students who hit the 40-hour threshold, that's where you want it to be 90%.
Okay, and another question for the benchmark, should we have 90% for survey? So I'm talking about the survey percent for the post rate for eligible student. It should be 90% or it should be, I'm talking
So-
about the survey
Okay,
follow-up.
for survey, of everybody who is in your survey group, the students who do not have social security numbers, right? Of all of those students, you should be serving 90% of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. I think that's all we have time for, unless anybody has a real quick question.
And I just want to jump in and say thank you again for you all being here and for Kate agreeing to do this Lunch and Learn. I put some stuff in the chat. So if you're interested in other Lunch and Learns that NYACCE is putting on, just go to that link and you'll see we have a couple of others scheduled. We'll be scheduling out for the rest of the year. And I think Lori had a question.
Well, I can email Kate and ask because I didn't get to find what I was looking for. But
Okay.
publicly, I'm going to say this Lunch and Learn was awesome. And I would love it if NYACCE could convince Kate to maybe make this a regular feature throughout the year. I found this really helpful, Kate. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. We'll see what we can do.
All right. If there are no other questions, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We know it's a busy time. And again, Kate, thank you so much. And we do look forward to seeing many of you at some of our future Lunch and Learns. If there are topics you'd like to see us have in our Lunch and Learns, you can always email me or our NYACCE email address, and we will take that into account too. So we'll be doing a lot of planning in August. So get us anything that you would like us to have presentations on, let us know, and we'll include that in our calendar. All right, thank you so much. We're going to give you a minute back. All have great weeks, and we'll see you soon.